Chapter 7 test review. So for this test review, a couple things for you. First of all, the topics are going to be written in purple on the top of the screen. This review is probably going to take a bit of time to get through. So if you're going through and you can kind of move along and fast forward if you would like, you can always see what topic is on the top. So if you think you already know a topic, you can kind of maybe skip past that or whatnot. But the topics will be there for you to take a look at as you go through this. Also, pause the video and try the problems yourself. So I'm going to go through, I'm going to display a problem. I'm then going to stop talking for a couple of seconds, and during that time, pause it, try it by yourself, and hopefully you can get your answer, then play it through and see if you got the right answer. If not, definitely make sure you go back and understand where you made your mistakes. Okay, so the very first one, we're going to talk about the unit circle. So the unit circle, if we have these three problems, pause the video here and see what they equal. Okay, hopefully you've paused it here. So now with the first one, if I have cosine of 3 pi over 4, first of all, I want to look at the unit circle, and I want to locate where 3 pi over 4 is on the unit circle. Pi over 4 is right here. That's our reference angle. That is a 45-degree angle. That means if I have a denominator of 4, 180 degrees, or 1 pi, is actually 4 pi over 4. So this is located one back from there. So 3 pi over 4 is right there. It is this triangle. It is a 45-degree reference angle. It's the same as 135 degrees. If I want the cosine value of that, the cosine value is this side of that triangle. So with the 45, 45, 90, that is the square root of 2 over 2. Since we are in quadrant 2, it is a negative square root of 2 over 2. So the answer to this first one, in blue, is negative square root of 2 over 2. If you need some time to take a look at the green and red problem, the sine and the tangent, go ahead and pause the video again and redo those problems, or whatever you can do. Okay, sine of 330 degrees. This one now is given in degrees. These other two were given in radians. I kind of switched them back and forth so you can get a little practice of both. So 330 degrees is in quadrant 4. It is going to be a 30-degree reference angle. Sine is this side, is the height. So with a 30-degree angle, that is going to be a 1/2. Since it's in quadrant 4, your sine value is negative. So the answer to this one is a negative 1/2. The last problem, 7 pi over 6. Pi over 6 is my reference angle. That's a 30-degree angle. That means 180 degrees is 6 pi over 6. 7 pi over 6 is 1 past that. Both of my side lengths are going to be negative because I'm in quadrant 3. Tangent is sine, which is a negative 1/2, divided by cosine, which is a negative square root of 3 over 2. So to solve this one, I take those and divide them. So I have a negative 1/2 times the reciprocal, which is negative 2 over the square root of 3. Negatives cancel out, the 2's cancel out, so I get 1 over the square root of 3. I need to rationalize my denominator, which is the square root of 3 over the square root of 3. So the answer, if I can get rid of some of this other stuff here, when I multiply these together, I'm going to get the square root of 3 over 3 as my answer. So the tangent of 7 pi over 6 equals the square root of 3 over 3. Next slide. Dealing with trig waves, so sine functions. So what I'm going to do is give you a graph I want you to see if you can come up with the equation for it. Keep in mind that there are multiple equations that you can get. So looking at that, the scaling is on there for you. Pause it and come up with your equation. All right. First thing I'm going to take a look at right now is my midline. I always want to identify the midline. The midline is right here. So that means my K value is -1. Taking a look at how high it goes up here and it goes down here. That tells me my amplitude from that midline is going to be 3. So that is my A value. The next thing I want to take a look at is how many cycles there are in 2 pi. All right. So if I look at the distance from 0 to 2 pi, that means this is going 1 cycle and 2 cycles in that distance. So that means if there are 2 cycles in 2 pi, that means the B value is 2. The period then would be pi. But if I'm coming up with the equation, I don't need the period for the equation. I just need the B value for my equation. So when I look at this, I have y equals, my amplitude is 3. Now, whether I'm going to use sine or cosine is going to make a difference here. So let's call this a sine graph. My B value is 2. X minus, I'm going to finish that in just a second. And my K is -1. My midline is -1. If I have a positive sine graph, that means I'm starting either here or here or here. Those are all spots on my midline where it is going up. That is a positive sign. So whichever point I pick of those, and I'll pick that one for right now. According to my scaling, that is an H value of -pi/2. So now in my parentheses, I have plus pi/2 because that went -pi/2. If I switch that to this point, that is my locator point. That is now a positive pi/2. So inside of here, I have x minus pi/2. If I did not want to use a positive sign, I could pick this point. That means my h value is now 0, but this is now a -3 sign. I could also pick another value. I could pick a value, say, right here. If I do that, this now becomes +3 cosine. And my h value is now a -pi/4, so it's x plus pi/4. If I want to switch that to a different locator point, say down here, it is now a negative cosine, so -3 cosine. And I am now at a positive pi/4, so my value in the parentheses is x minus pi/4. All of those will work. So there are a variety of things you can do. We're going to practice this one again. Go ahead and give it a shot. Pause the video. All right, looking at this, then my midline is right here, but that means I have a K value of 0. My amplitude is going up 2 and down 2 from that, so my A value is 2. Here's the next part that's kind of tricky. For this one, I'm looking from -pi to +pi. That is a distance to 2 pi. And the only reason why I did that is because this graph didn't go all the way to 2 pi. But this is a distance of 2 pi, from -pi to pi. In that distance, there is 1 2, 3, and 4 full cycles. That means my B value then is 4. Again, the period would be then 2 pi over 4, which is pi over 2. But for the equation, I don't need the period. The easiest for this one would probably be to start it right here, because that gives me an h value of 0. So I would have y equals 2 sine 4x. And that would be it. If I wanted to move that to, say, up here, so pi is right here, half of the way there, that's pi over 2, half of that is pi over 4, and half of that is pi over 8. I'm just using my fractions to keep dividing in half. So that means I still have 2 as my amplitude, I still have 4 as my B value, but this is no longer a sine wave. I'm starting at the top. This would now be a cosine, and it would be x minus pi over 8. Again, I do not have to put the plus 0 from that. We don't have to write plus 0, but I could do it as a cosine graph. So again, a lot of different varieties that you could try here. Those are a couple of them. Last one of these, give it a shot. Okay, midline is right here. K value is positive 1. Looking at my scaling, I have going up 1 or down 1. So my A value is 1. So on this one, it's a little bit more difficult on maybe where I want to start. So I could do a cosine or a negative cosine. I could do a sine or a negative sine. Depends on what you want to pick. Again, if I look at a distance of 2 pi, so from here all the way to here is 2 pi. That's a little bit hard to maybe see what that is, but if I move this over, the bottom to the bottom there is still a distance of 2 pi. That is 1 full cycle, which means my B value on this is 1, which means the period would be 2 pi. If I wanted to start right there, that would be a negative pi over 4. So my equation would be y equals, I'm starting on the midline going down, so it's a negative sine. My A value is 1, so negative 1 sine, or just negative sine. My B value is 1, so I don't need to write that. X plus pi over 4, plus because I have a negative pi over 4, I went to the left, and then plus 1 for my K value. Let's say I want to start it right here. That is now starting at the top. That is a positive cosine. My H value for that is going to be negative 3 pi over 4. So I would have y equals cosine. Again, my B value is 1. X plus 3 pi over 4 plus 1. If I did want to make this a positive sign, right there would be my spot. That is a positive 3 pi over 4. So it would be y equals sine x minus pi over 4 plus 1. You also have the possibility right there of a negative cosine. So you could do that. You would just need to switch your h value to be a positive pi over 4, and it would be a negative cosine. All right, next topic. Write the equation. Go ahead and pause. My locator point right now is at negative 3, 1. This is the parent function, square root of x. Square root of x normally goes to the right one and up 1. This one is going up 2 times that amount. So that is my a value. So the equation is y equals 2 square root x plus 3 plus 1. Give it a shot. Locator point is at 5, negative 1. The parent function is the absolute value of x. Normally I go to the right 1, up 1, right 2, up 2, right 3, up 3. The first two I'm not going to look at because I don't have points, but I do know that point. I normally go to the right 3, up 3, but now I'm going to the right 3, up 1. That is an a value of 1/3. So my equation is 1/3 absolute value, x minus 5 minus 1. Next topic, solving equations. I have a couple of them for you. Go ahead and solve that one. All right, hopefully you're finished, and the first thing I want to do is get rid of anything that's adding, so I'm going to subtract 5 from both sides, giving me 3 absolute value of 2x minus 1 equals 21. My goal is to get this absolute value by itself, so I'm going to divide everything by 3. That cancels out. Absolute value of 2x minus 1 equals 7. That now gives me 2 separate problems. So I'm going to have 2x minus 1 equals 7. So I want to know the x value that's going to make this equal a 7. But also the absolute value of negative 7 equals 7. So I want to figure out what value here equals negative 7. So I have 2x minus 1 equals negative 7. These are the 2 problems I work on now. So I add 1, I get 2x equals 8, and x equals 4. For the second one, I add 1, and I get 2x equals negative 6, and x equals negative 3. Those are my 2 values that work. Again, solving equations, give it a shot. All right, we are in logarithm form. I do not want it to be in log form in order to solve this. I want to switch to exponential. Base of 5, exponent of 2 equals x plus 3. That's 25 equals x plus 3, and x equals 22. One more of these. Go ahead. Similar to the very first problem, where I wanted to get the absolute value by itself, I'm going to do the same thing here, where I want to get this by itself right now. So I'm going to add 2. So I have 4x minus 1 cubed equals 32. Divide by 4. X minus 1 cubed equals 8. I am now going to cube root both sides. Cube root of 8 is going to be 2. So x is 3. Here's the next problem, exponential equations. So your parents put $2,500 in an account that earns 6.5%. How much will be the account after 4 years, and how long before there is $6,000 in the account? Go ahead and give that a shot. All right, so with this part here, we are starting with $2,500. If it is earning 6.5%, that means your multiplier is going to be 100%, or 1, plus 6.5%, which is 0.065. So my multiplier is 1.065. After 4 years, that is my exponent. So I put this into the calculator. Make sure you put this all in at once. Do not go through and round this number and then multiply it. So keep all your decimal points, multiply it by 2,500, and then round to 2 decimal places at the end. And the reason why we're rounding to 2 decimal places is because we're dealing with money, and money we round to 2 decimal places. So that should be 3,216.1658 and so on. This number right here, the third decimal place, decides if I'm rounding up or down. That is a 5, so that means I'm rounding it up. So my answer is $3,216.17. The next part of this problem. How long before there's $6,000 in the account? Well, if I take a look at my equation, and I set it equal to 6,000, I now need to solve for x. To do that, I'm going to divide both sides by 2,500. That gives me 1.065 to the x equals that number, which is 2.4. This now becomes a logarithm problem because I'm solving for my exponent, which is my variable. So this now is log and log of both sides using the power property. The power property takes that exponent and moves it out front. I can now divide both sides by the log of 1.065. Those cancel out, so x equals whatever this number is. So use your calculator. 13.902 about years. So almost 14 years at that percentage rate. And the last problem that we're going to work on, completing the square and state the vertex. So go ahead and pause that. Okay, if you remember everything I've done this year, when I do these, I get rid of this positive 35, my constant term. I always push it off to the side, and I don't worry about it right now. I want to look at these. I need to get my leading coefficient factored out. So that 4, I want to factor out of both those terms. So I'm going to have 4x squared plus 6x plus 35. I am going to complete the square with this, my x squared plus 4, but I'm going to be making 4 of those squares. So now if I think about that, if I have my x squared, if I have 6 x's, that means I have 3 of them on each side, giving me an x plus 3 and an x plus 3. I have 4 sets of these, so I would do this 4 times. And now if you look at that, I have 4x squareds and 24 x's. But to complete all of those squares, I need to add 9 each time. So my problem here is now, as I get rid of and erase a bunch of these, 4x squared plus 6x plus 9, because that's what I've added to complete that square. But now I need to subtract away this number that I added. But I added 9 4 times, so I'm subtracting away 9 4 times. See how I take those two and multiply them together? Plus 35. So y equals 4x plus 3 square. That is an x plus 3 square. This is negative 36. Plus 35 is minus 1. So my vertex is at negative 3, negative 1. I have a stretch factor of 4. Hope that helped.